Hi, welcome. I'm Sarah D, and this is
Dr. D.
Yes, and we're going to have another economic conversation today, and we're going to have a conversation about Milton Friedman.
Milton Friedman.
He's one of your heroes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's not a micro.
Well, so he's yes. So back in the day, they were everything.
Oh.
Yeah, everything. So yes, he was a microeconomist, but he's best known for macroeconomics and something called the monetarist theory.
The monetarist theory. Okay, so it wasn't the monitor in the hallway, but
it was the monetarist in the hallway.
Okay, so there's a conversation, actually not even a conversation, but a quote taken from Milton Friedman that was juxtaposed with a quote taken from our president, Joe Biden. And Joe Biden is saying
that inflation is not caused by government spending.
And Milton Friedman is saying
it can only be caused by government spending.
So that's the bottom line. That's where that's where this conversation is starting. Now, are they both telling absolute truth or both telling absolute falsehood?
So they're both speaking, but from a different perspective.
Okay.
And there's truth in what both of them are saying.
Does it have to do with the time period? So
part of it has to do with the time period. And part of it has to do with the concept of short run versus long run.
So if something I said was taken out of context and put into another place, I might say, wait a minute, that's not what I meant.
Yes, you might.
So if Milton Friedman were alive, he'd probably turn over in his grave if he knew how his words were being spent.
He would not be, yes.
Okay.
He would not be completely.
And that comes from a PhD economist who kind of idolizes Milton Friedman. One of his idols. Okay, so continue on. We're going to talk about that today, right?
Okay.
And we're going to talk about that with regard to three parts of.
Help me. So we're going to talk about it in terms of, first of all, two time frames. And so when we talk about the two time frames, we have to think about what's happening in those two time frames and what does it mean.
Right.
And so we're going to talk about a time frame that we call the long run.
Okay.
And the long run is, think of it as kind of the average of how the economy persists over long periods of time.
And long means long 10 years, 15 years?
Yeah, long means long. Long means long, right?
About this long or this long?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay, it's ambiguous. It's not specific.
And the short run has to do with when specific market distortions take place and resolve themselves.
Okay, so when a shock is a market distortion, same thing as a shock. When a shock happens, like say COVID, when it resolves itself.
Yeah, so the short run is the economy working through from the shock to resolving itself.
So have we resolved it?
So we don't believe in letting the economy resolve itself all the way. And for lots of good reasons.
When we did, we got the Great Depression.
The Great Depression is an excellent example of letting the economy resolve itself. It doesn't always resolve itself nicely, right? So sometimes it resolves itself very unnicely.
And is that why we have this guy?
So the Federal Reserve came into existence because of a monetary crisis that happened before the Great Depression, where the President of the United States had to go and beg Wall Street to bail out the country. Yes, that's why the Federal Reserve exists.
Okay.
Although it existed, something similar to the Federal Reserve existed before. There was this guy by the name of Alexander Hamilton that believed that we should have a central bank. A lot of other people thought that a central bank was too much power for the federal government to have, so there we go.
Did I bring the Federal Reserve in too early a little bit?
No.
Okay.
We can talk about the Federal Reserve.
So, but does that have to do with any? Are we done with Milton Friedman and Biden? Did we solve that?
No, absolutely not. We have to talk about the things that the two of them were talking about.
And is that what we're going to talk about?
So it depends. Yeah, we can start with the short run, in which case we'll talk about what the Federal Reserve does in the short run.
Okay. All right. So what does the Federal Reserve do in the short run?
So the Federal Reserve currently, its mandate, what the Federal Reserve is supposed to do is keep the purchasing power of money constant across time. So green balloons are going to be money.
These are money, constant balloons.
Right. So they're going to keep its purchasing power constant across time. And it has a second thing, to keep the economy moving at full employment, whatever that means.
Okay, so constant and full employment.
Yes, so that's the Federal Reserve's job.
All right, we'll see if it fits here.
And the Federal Reserve is going to do that by adjusting how much of this there is.
And that's because they've got a magic checkbook.
They've got a magic checkbook. We talked about that. Yeah, we talked about their magic checkbook in another, but that's right. That's exactly right. The Federal Reserve, that's not going to work, so I'll just hold it.
Okay.
The Federal Reserve has lots and lots and lots of power over how much money is available in the economy. That's what they do. And so let's just say we've got this much money in the economy.
Okay.
And what do you do with money?
You spend it.
To do what?
To get stuff.
To get stuff. That's exactly right. I spend this to get that because money is kind of ugly. It doesn't taste good.
This is all the pretty colors.
Yeah, these got pretty colors. They're green, right? So it's kind of ugly. All sorts of colors there. And we know, well, Dr. D likes colors.
He just like colors.
Lots of colors there, so I can spend my money to get those colors.
But this is all the money there is in the world.
Yeah, it's all the money, all of the dollars.
Because the Federal Reserve decides all
That's
the
how many
dollars, the American dollars, that there will be circulating at any one time.
Now,
this is all the stuff that we currently have right now.
that we can make. Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Right. So we're talking about a time frame in which the amount of stuff we make is fairly constant, fixed. Okay? So Federal Reserve, if it decides to change the money supply, so I'm going to give you the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
And the Federal Reserve decides, let's just make more money. More money. They put all that new more money in here, so now we've got more money. How much stuff is there to buy?
There's no more stuff.
There's no more stuff. Okay. So it's just going to cost me more balloons, more green balloons to buy those balloons.
Because there's more money.
All that's happened is the price has gone up.
So it's like if you had 10 cents, now that 10 cents is $1.
Yeah.
So that's inflation.
Yes. And that's Milton Friedman.
That's what he was talking about.
That's exactly what Milton Friedman was talking about.
He was talking about a time when the stuff was pretty fixed.
Fixed.
And so you change the money, and it doesn't mean you have more stuff.
No.
The thing that makes you have more stuff is when you have a producer producing more stuff.
That's right.
And that's something we have a lot more producers now than we used to have. And it seems like we get more all the time, although I suppose some of them went out of business recently too.
Yeah, so the people that are buying stuff.
That's you and me. And you and me are also producers.
Yes. The producers and consumers come together in a marketplace and they buy stuff, right? So now let's think about this just a little bit. We're going to talk about it in terms of gasoline.
Okay.
Right? So when we're talking about it in terms of gasoline, and we'll talk about it in terms of gasoline and COVID.
That's good because it's familiar.
It's familiar. It's what's happened. So there was gasoline, the market for gasoline. There were consumers and there were producers. And then COVID happened. What happened?
Well, we didn't drive as much.
Consumers didn't want as much gasoline.
No.
Good. They weren't driving to work anymore.
But the producers already had as much as they had produced in gasoline.
So what happened?
Well, they sold the gasoline for a lower price.
Yeah, so gasoline before COVID was selling for about $3 a gallon. And then it fell down to about $2 a gallon in the middle of COVID.
Yep.
Wow.
We liked that, didn't we?
I did. I was pretty fond of it. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
And then when you started driving more because restrictions came off.
Yeah, restrictions came off. Consumers wanted more of it, more gasoline. What happened to the price of gasoline?
It went up because there was still the same amount. And part of the reason there's the same amount is because they won't let them build more.
Well, so, there's lots of reasons, and we'll get into lots of reasons. But the deal is that we can see that prices so we talked about the gasoline market, right? So if consumers are buying less, then the price goes down. If consumers are buying more, then the price goes up. So we can have inflation just from the consumption side. Yeah. Just from the consumption side. And that's different than Milton Friedman's discussion about money supply, right? It has nothing to do with money supply. It has everything to do with just
the consumer's demand.
Now, here's the deal. The market will adjust that.
Because eventually
in the long run,
will finally figure out a way to produce more without making more factories.
Well, no, they won't. What will happen? No, the price of gasoline will go up, which it did, or go down, depending upon which direction we go, and we'll either produce more or less. But we're just talking about a single market gasoline. But if we're talking about all of the things that are made in the country, as opposed to, so we're talking about all of the stuff made, then in order to produce more, what do I have to do?
I think I'm getting lost already.
Okay, so if I need to make more gasoline, I need to hire more people.
Yep.
So I just steal them from another industry.
You hire them, say you'll pay them more, I'll pay you more money.
And they'll come in out of whatever other industry, mining or whatever else they were doing, so they come in and do that. But if I'm talking about the economy as a whole, we're talking about all the people that are working. Where do I get more?
Where do you get more people?
Yeah.
I guess you let people in. You take.
So we could let immigration in. That would be one way to do it, but we're not terribly good at that. We got walls. So okay, now what do you do?
I don't know. You said they're forcing people to have more babies. I don't know.
Yeah, you could force people to have more babies. That's another thing we could do, but that doesn't pay off until 20 years later, right? So the deal is not much.
Not much.
Right?
Okay. Well, I was looking for an answer.
Not much.
I didn't know that was an option.
Right, so you've got to somehow convince, so in 4 years I'm going to retire. Mm-hmm. So you've got to convince me not to retire. So how do you convince me not to retire?
Say, hey, listen, Dr. D will pay you more.
You pay me more, I won't retire. Good deal.
Pay you more and you won't have to do quite as much work.
Or let's say I'm a 20-year-old and I'm going to college. Why am I going to college?
You're going to college because you want to learn and make the world a better place.
You're going to learn something, and that learning something is going to give you a higher wage in the future. Mm-hmm. So now, if I want you not to go to college and I want you to make gasoline, what do I have to do?
I'm just going to give you more money than if you had more knowledge.
That's right. And so
get more knowledge here.
So
knowledge is knowledge.
Right. So when the consumer wants more stuff, the economy has to convince people into the labor force. And to convince them into the labor force means you have to pay more for everybody, not just, retiring professors and their students. You have to pay more to everybody to get them in to make more stuff. That pushes wages up. That pushes
their ability to buy.
The price is up, right? So as the consumers want more, the price gets pushed up. That's consumer-driven inflation.
And so that's what Joe Biden was talking about. He said it's not just
right. So that's not the government printing more money.
No.
That's the consumers coming out from under COVID restrictions wanting more stuff, right? That's driving inflation upwards. But there's a secondary problem as well. So we talked about the consumer can drive things up. What happens over on this side? What happens to the producer? What also can drive it up? So the consumer wants more stuff.
We have pre-conversations and I lost them already, so you just have to do it.
So what happens when the producer can't make more stuff or has to make less stuff?
When it has to make less stuff, it has to charge more for it because that's all.
Right, so you've got the producer making less stuff, the consumer still wants it, so they bid up the price, right? So the price gets bid up because the producer can't make as much. They can't make as many Ford pickups because they can't get the chips from China. They can't make as many, right? So all of these things. And why can't they do that?
Some of it's ports, some of it's
right. So you've got so you've got these restrictions in China that don't let the Chinese make stuff. You've got ports that aren't offloading stuff quickly and easily. So you end up with production side, supply side.
And I guess luxury items do that same thing.
Yeah.
They just fabricated it.
Yes. They fabricated.
We're so cool.
Yeah. So the deal is
now
that
we believe it.
Inflation also comes from restricted production because of shocks to the economy or enhanced consumption because of shocks to the economy. So the shock to the economy for enhanced consumption was we had to sit at home, we couldn't go out and eat, we couldn't do anything, and then, I've wanted to do something for a long time, and all of a sudden the restrictions come off, so everybody goes out and does something. Well, that's going to give this big push up on the consumption side. The restrictions in production, people still afraid to go to work.
Less of this, right?
Yeah.
You probably have less of this.
So you end up with these two things. This is called transitory inflation, right? I print more money permanently and I get permanent inflation. I have shocks to the marketplace, I have short run or transitory inflation. Okay, transitory inflation is a problem.
Well, because we're dealing with it.
We're dealing with it right now. So,
But it could be worse.
yes. So one of the things, so if I was a pure Milton Friedman person, I would say, well, the transitory inflation is actually transitory. It may take 5 years, but it's transitory. It will go away. It will resolve itself. The producers and consumers will come to a new agreement and they'll resolve it. The problem is that in that process, it's not terribly nice.
And that's where we are.
Yes.
We're in the not nice place.
We're in a not nice place. It's not a nice process. The
But
weak
it's
will
better-
not survive.
But it's still better than the Great Depression.
It's better than the Great Depression, and it could become a Great Depression if we play funny games.
If we didn't have these guys helping us, it would.
Yes, exactly. So here's the deal, right? So the deal is that if we allow consumers to die off because they can't get food,
Yeah, and like that's part of the reason the Federal Reserve allowed more money to be put in the marketplace, because those checks you spent were to help you.
Yes.
And you spent them. And the only reason you'd have a leg to stand on is if you didn't spend them and you gave them back to the government. So
yeah, if you didn't take your, I put mine in savings.
Yeah.
I was very proud of myself. Put it in savings, not giving it back to the government. No, not at all. Well, I will in taxes later on, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And slower growth later on. That's
Yeah, you take, it's kind of like when you go, who buys a house cash? There are some people who do. I have a son who just sold a house. The people who bought it cash. Well, we are buying a house, the second house we've ever bought in our entire lives, and we didn't buy it on cash. We're buying it with a
Okay.
bank loan. We're paying for it over time.
Yeah.
And that's what this is happening now. Those checks that we got, we're going to have to pay for it over time. That's all it is. It's like buying a house.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go live in the street because the Federal Reserve made sure that we were able to function. So thank you, Federal Reserve.
So the government, we have to remember when we're talking about the government, in 2019, the president was Donald Trump, right? So Donald Trump and Joe Biden, right? Both of them decided to send people checks, right? When the government sent people checks, they had to get the money from somewhere. They borrowed it. To the extent that they borrowed it from me, then there's no long-run inflationary issue.
Because if you buy government bonds, then that's who they borrowed it from, is from you.
That's right. So but if the Federal Reserve bought some of those bonds, they used their magic checkbook and they made the money supply bigger, which they did, right? They didn't buy all of them, but they bought a lot of them, and the Federal Reserve made the money supply larger. Guess what they're doing now? Don't whine about your interest rate if you don't think that. Yeah, yep, they're taking money right out.
They're making some of it disappear again, so that's why it's going to get uncomfortable. But
Yep.
you didn't have to be in the street, and you had a house to live in, so be happy.
Yeah. So that's what the Federal Reserve is doing. And so the money supply is shrinking now. And the goal is to cool off the consumer. So if the consumer is less willing and able to spend, what happens to prices in the marketplace? If I'm buying less,
It's going to go... Dean, my head is just not even working. It's going to go down. I'm sorry, but it does. It turns
it has to
on.
go on sale.
It has to go on sale.
That's exactly right. So it's going to go on sale. That's exactly what's going to happen. So that's what the Federal Reserve is up to right now. That's what it's doing. It's decreasing the money supply. Interest rates are going up, and so credit purchases are going to go down. As credit purchases go down, price levels will fall with them.
Very good. So getting back to the reason we are talking about this is that little clip that we had one of our listeners send to us. Biden is speaking truth, and so is
Milton Friedman. They're just
Friedman.
talking about it in two different time frames. Yeah. Biden is saying the current mess we're in has to do with shocks to consumers and producers. Transitory inflation, not caused by the government generating excess money.
Even though the government did, that's not what
Even
caused
though they
what's going on
did,
now.
prices went down when they printed the money. That's the important thing to remember, right? Gas prices went down to $2 when they printed the money.
So
now that they're now prices are going up as they are shredding money, right? So you can't claim that it's a direct relationship. It would be in the long run, but in the short run, we're dealing with transitory inflation that is caused by shocks to the marketplace between consumers and producers. And that's being adjusted again through the only policy tool that we have with the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve's only policy tool is the money supply.
To shred some of it.
They
So
will
that
shred
there's
some
less.
of the money so there's less. So prices will eventually come down. That's what they're doing.
We covered it.
Yeah, we covered it.
We did well.
They're both right.
Yay!
And they're both wrong.
And that's life.
I love it.
Thank you for joining us for this economic conversation. We hope that it was enlightening for you. And we'll see you next week. I'm Sarah D.
I'm Dr. D. May the peace of God in me recognize the peace of God in you.
Make it a great day.